Hello, and welcome back to Ebon Whisper. Before we begin, feel free to leave a comment and tell me where you're listening from. I love reading every single one. If you enjoyed chilling tales that speak in the Ebon Whisper, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel. Turn on notifications so you never miss a new story. Now, get comfortable, dim the lights if you dare, relax your mind, let the outside world fade away, and let's begin. Story 1. My waking life had become exhausting. Every day felt exactly the same. I woke up tired, went to work tired, came home even more tired, and then spent the few hours I had left trying to recover enough strength to do it all again the next morning. My job was physical, demanding, and never seemed to slow down. Long shifts left my muscles aching. My back hurt almost constantly. My feet would throb when I finally took my shoes off at night. Even when I was sitting still, I could feel stress moving through my body like electricity. There was always something to worry about. Bills, work, rent, food. Whether I was going to get enough hours that week or too many. Whether my body would eventually give out before I could afford to stop working. Most nights, I would lie in bed completely drained, but my mind refused to shut off. I would stare into the darkness, thinking about everything I had to do the next day. Sometimes it took an hour to fall asleep. Sometimes 2. Sleep was supposed to be the only peaceful part of my life, but even that rarely felt peaceful. My dreams were usually messy, random things that disappeared seconds after I woke up. Blurry faces, strange buildings, conversations that made no sense. Nothing memorable. Then one night, everything changed. I did not feel myself falling asleep. There was no normal transition. One moment I was lying in my bedroom beneath my cheap ceiling fan, staring at the faint glow of the alarm clock beside me. The next moment, I was standing somewhere else. At first, I thought I had entered the most vivid dream of my life. Then I started to realize that the word dream did not come close to describing it. The place was enormous, beautiful, impossible. I eventually started calling it Sleepland because I had no other name for it. The first time I arrived there, I stood completely still for several minutes because I could barely understand what I was seeing. Imagine one of those ancient elven cities from a fantasy movie, except larger and more beautiful than anything built for a screen. Great white stone towers rose hundreds of feet into the sky. Some were thin and elegant. Others were wide, covered in carved arches and open balconies. The strange thing was that the buildings did not seem separate from nature. Massive ancient trees grew between the towers, and in some places, the white stone actually curved around the trunks, almost as if the city and forest had grown together. Bridges stretched between branches. Marble walkways passed beneath roots wider than cars. Everything looked perfectly designed. Not constructed, designed. As if the entire place had been planned by someone who understood beauty in a way human beings did not. There was no sun. The sky remained in a permanent twilight, deep blue mixed with purple and black. Thousands of stars covered it, far more than I had ever seen from Earth. Some were so bright that they reflected off the white stone. Even the plants glowed. Small flowers gave off soft blue light. Silver grass moved, even though I could feel almost no wind. Pale moss covered the base of the trees and sparkled like pieces of the night sky had fallen onto the ground. The air smelled unbelievable. Fresh rain, autumn leaves, cold stone, pine. Everything felt clean. I stood there breathing it in, and for the first time in years, I felt completely calm. Then I noticed something else. I was not tired. My back did not hurt. My feet did not hurt. My shoulders felt loose. I felt weightless, almost like gravity had weakened. I lifted my hands and stared at them. They looked normal. I touched my face. Normal. I moved my fingers. Everything felt completely real. That was what frightened me for a moment. Dreams are usually strange when you pay attention to them. Details move. Text changes. Places do not make sense. Sleepland was different. I could think clearly. More clearly than I could while awake. I knew my name. I knew where I lived. I remembered going to bed. I remembered work. I remembered that I had to wake up the next morning. I also knew, somehow, that my physical body was not lying in my bedroom anymore. I was there. Actually there. I walked through the nearest building and ran my fingers across one of the walls. The stone was cold, smooth, perfect. There were no cracks, no dust, no signs of age. I scratched it with my fingernail and felt resistance. I picked up a glowing leaf from the floor. I smelled it. I even bit the corner of it. It tasted bitter. Everything had texture. Everything had weight. Everything was real. I wandered for what felt like hours. The city seemed completely empty. No footsteps, no voices, no animals, no birds, nothing. I was the only living person there. And for some reason, that did not make me afraid. It made me peaceful. For the first time in my life, nobody wanted anything from me. No manager shouting instructions, no phone buzzing, no traffic, no bills, no stress, just silence. Perfect, endless silence. Eventually, without warning, I woke up. My alarm was screaming beside me. I opened my eyes and immediately felt disappointed. My bedroom looked terrible. The walls seemed gray. The air felt stale. My mattress suddenly seemed uncomfortable. The sound of traffic outside my window was irritating. After experiencing Sleepland, the real world seemed cheap, ugly, heavy. I went to work that day thinking about nothing else. I replayed every detail in my head. The towers, the glowing plants, the twilight, the cold stone beneath my fingers. I could not wait to sleep again. That night, I went to bed early, and I returned. Same place, same city, same endless twilight. That was when I knew it had not been a normal dream. Over the next several days, I became obsessed. I started changing my life around Sleepland. I bought melatonin. I stopped drinking coffee after noon. I went to bed earlier. Sometimes I skipped dinner because eating made me stay awake longer. I stopped answering messages from friends at night. I stopped watching television. I would get home from work, shower, lie down, and wait to escape. Sleepland became the only part of my life I cared about. Every visit felt better than the last. I explored huge libraries with empty shelves. I crossed bridges suspended between giant trees. I walked through courtyards covered in glowing flowers. I discovered fountains filled with perfectly clear water, though the water never seemed to move. I climbed towers and stood on balconies so high that I could see miles of silver forest beyond the city. And every single time, I was alone. At first, I liked that. Then, exactly 1 month after my first visit, I realized I was not alone at all. That night, I climbed one of the tallest towers I had found. It took a long time. The staircase curved upward inside the structure, passing hundreds of empty rooms and windows. At the top was a wide balcony. I stepped outside. The view was incredible. Below me, a forest of silver trees stretched into the distance. Their leaves glowed softly beneath the stars. White bridges passed between the towers like ribbons. I leaned against the stone railing and breathed in the smell of rain. Then something moved far below. At first, I assumed it was a shadow. But shadows did not move like that. I leaned forward. Something was walking along the marble path beneath the tower. Something huge. It was the first living thing I had ever seen in Sleepland. My stomach tightened immediately. The creature was massive. Bear-like was the closest comparison I could think of, but even that felt wrong. Its body was too tall. Its shoulders were too narrow. Its limbs were too long. It moved heavily, slowly, almost dragging itself forward. Thick black fur covered its entire body. Not dark brown, not gray, black. So black that the twilight seemed to disappear around it. The creature had no visible mouth, no nose, no ears, no claws, no features at all, except for its eyes. Two enormous white eyes stared from the darkness of its face. Perfect white circles, bright, unblinking. They looked completely unnatural. I should have hidden. Instead, curiosity won. I leaned farther over the balcony. My shoes scraped against the stone. The sound was tiny. But in the silence of Sleepland, it echoed. The creature stopped. Its body became completely still. Then its head snapped upward. Those huge white eyes locked directly onto me. The instant they did, something slammed into my body. It felt as though an invisible force had hit me in the chest. The balcony disappeared. The sky disappeared. Everything twisted. Then I was back in bed. I gasped and sat up. My heart was pounding so hard that my chest hurt. I looked around the room. Dark. Normal. I rubbed my face and tried to calm down. It had been terrifying. But maybe it was still some kind of dream. Then I reached toward my phone. That was when I saw the wall. I froze. The section of drywall beside my bed was gone. Not damaged. Gone. In its place was a perfect square of white stone. I stared at it for a long time, then slowly reached out. My fingers touched cold marble. My breathing stopped. It was identical to the stone in Sleepland. Same color, same smooth surface, same coldness. Sunlight from outside began creeping through the curtains, reflecting off it. I should have panicked. I should have called someone. I should have left the apartment. Instead, I became even more obsessed. That creature had done this. Somehow, it had followed me. Or something from Sleepland had crossed over. I needed to understand. The next night, I returned. This time, I was not interested in the towers. I was hunting. I went back to the walkway where I had seen the creature. I followed it toward the forest. For the first time, Sleepland did not feel peaceful. Every shadow seemed deeper. Every tree seemed to hide something. I moved carefully between the massive trunks, listening. Eventually, I saw a movement ahead. The creature. I stayed behind a tree and watched. It moved through the silver forest before approaching another white tower. It stopped at the entrance. Then it leaned forward and looked inside, almost like it was searching. I wondered what it wanted. Was it looking for me? Was it looking for someone else? I stepped closer. A branch cracked beneath my foot. The creature spun around. Its giant white eyes found me immediately. Again, the world flipped. I woke standing beside my bed. The smell hit me first. Autumn rain, so strong that it completely covered the dusty smell of my apartment. Then I felt something strange beneath my feet. Soft, wet. I looked down. The carpet was gone. Silver moss covered the entire floor. It glowed faintly in the darkness. I lifted one foot. The moss slowly rose again where I had stepped. I felt sick. The wall had been one thing. This was different. Sleepland was spreading. And I finally understood the pattern. When I returned without being seen, nothing changed. But whenever the creature looked directly at me, something came back. The stone, the moss. Pieces of that world were attaching themselves to mine. I told myself I would stop. I promised myself I would stay awake. That promise lasted one day. Sleepland had become an addiction. Even knowing the danger, I wanted to return. My real life felt unbearable after being there. So I kept sleeping. I became careful. I avoided the creature. For several nights, nothing changed. Then I made the worst decision of my life. I decided to confront it. That night, I found it near the base of a tower. It was sitting in the glowing grass. Its dark body looked like a hole cut into the world. For several minutes, I watched from behind a tree. Then I stepped out. I did not hide. I walked directly toward it. My hands were shaking. "What are you?" I shouted. The creature turned. Those white eyes locked onto mine. I waited for the flip. Nothing happened. My stomach dropped. The creature slowly stood. It was much larger up close. Its head towered above me. The black fur moved slightly, as if something underneath it was breathing. Its giant eyes widened. Not with anger, with something that looked almost like fear. Then a sound came from its featureless face. It was not a voice. It was a deep, grinding vibration that I felt inside my skull. The words appeared in my mind. "You carved the door." The creature stepped closer. "Now let us through." Then everything flipped. I woke screaming. I threw myself backward, expecting to hit my headboard. Instead, my back slammed against cold stone. I opened my eyes. My bedroom was gone. The walls had become white marble. The ceiling was missing. Above me stretched the endless twilight sky of Sleepland. Stars glittered where my ceiling fan should have been. My bed was still there, but silver moss had completely covered the floor around it. My nightstand was half buried beneath glowing plants. I stood slowly. This was not a dream. I could feel my heartbeat. I could feel the cold air. I was awake, completely awake. I stepped toward what used to be my bedroom door. Beyond it was a huge white hallway. My apartment had become part of the tower. I ran. The staircase outside my apartment was still in approximately the same place, but now it curved downward through the inside of a massive spire. I ran down it as fast as I could. My footsteps echoed. For the first time, I understood the creature's words. I had carved the door. Every night I slept there, I had made the connection stronger. Every time I returned, every time I let it see me, I had opened something. I reached the bottom of the tower and saw large doors ahead. I pushed through them. Cold pavement struck my bare feet. Real pavement. I looked around. I was outside. My street. My world. The apartment building behind me still looked mostly normal from the outside. But through the windows, I could see white towers and glowing trees where rooms should have been. I did not stop. I ran. The street was empty. Streetlights cast yellow circles across the road. My lungs burned. I just wanted distance. 1 block away, I saw someone. A man walking his dog. Relief flooded through me, a real person. I started toward him. "Hey!" At least I tried to say it. My vision jerked. Everything snapped sideways. Flip. But I did not return to Sleepland. I was still standing in the street. Something was wrong. My body felt incredibly heavy. My breathing sounded deeper. I tried calling out again. No voice came. Only a low, grinding vibration. The same sound the creature had made. I looked down. My hands were gone. In their place were enormous black arms. Long, thick, covered in fur. I lifted one. The movement felt slow and heavy. My entire body had changed. I was huge. The dog saw me first. It froze. Its ears dropped. Then it began whining. The man pulled on the leash. "What is it?" The dog backed away, trembling. The man turned. His eyes searched the darkness. Then he saw me. I watched his face change. Confusion. Then fear. then complete horror. His skin went pale. His mouth opened. He stumbled backward. I wanted to tell him I was human. I wanted to tell him to run. I tried speaking. Only that grinding sound came out. That was when I realized what he was seeing. Cold night air touched my face, but there was almost no face left for it to touch. No mouth, no nose, no ears, no skin, only fur and eyes. 2 huge white eyes, unblinking. I understood. The creature had never been hunting me. It had been another person, someone who had made the same mistake, someone who had found Sleepland before I did, someone who had become addicted to it, someone who had opened the door, someone who had eventually changed. The man in front of me stared into my eyes. I saw terror in his face. Then the air around him twisted. His body flickered. And suddenly, he disappeared. He did not run. He did not fall. He simply flipped. I stood completely still. The dog's leash dropped onto the pavement. For several seconds, the dog stared at the empty place where its owner had been. Then it ran. I knew exactly where the man had gone. Sleepland. My paradise. My prison. My replacement world. And as I stood alone beneath the streetlights, trapped inside this enormous black body, I finally understood the rest. The creature had not meant, "Now let us through," as a threat. It had been warning me. Every person who becomes obsessed with Sleepland opens another door. Every time someone is seen, the worlds move closer together. And once enough of Sleepland crosses into our world, there is no difference between sleeping and waking anymore. I looked back toward my apartment. The building was changing. White stone crawled across the brick. Silver light shone through the windows. Ancient branches pushed through the roof. Above it, for just a moment, I thought I saw the twilight sky spreading behind the clouds. I wanted to scream, but I no longer had a mouth. All I could make was that deep, grinding vibration. Somewhere far away, another person was probably waking beneath the endless stars, standing alone among white towers, breathing in the smell of autumn rain, feeling better than they had ever felt in their waking life. They would think they had found paradise. They would explore. They would return night after night. Eventually, they would see me, and when they did, curiosity would overcome fear, just like it had with me. They would follow. They would stare. They would wonder what I was. And I would try to warn them. I would try to explain. But all they would hear would be a terrible grinding sound coming from a creature with no mouth. Then they would wake, and a small piece of Sleepland would come back with them. A square of white stone, a patch of glowing moss, a strange smell of rain, a doorway, then another and another, until their home was no longer theirs, until waking up stopped saving them. I watched the empty street. My giant white eyes reflected the streetlights. Somewhere behind me, the white towers continued growing. The door was open now, and I had carved it myself. Story 2. The emergency alert came through at exactly 11:47 on Tuesday night. My phone started vibrating against the bedside table so loudly that it woke me up immediately. For a second, I thought someone was calling me. I reached out in the dark, picked up the phone, and squinted at the bright screen. A notification covered almost half of it. It was a public safety warning. Residents who were experiencing numbness, involuntary movement, disturbed sleep, or unusual repetitive behavior were being told to stay inside and wait for further instructions. The strangest part came at the end. Do not restrain affected limbs. I read the warning twice. Then I sat up properly and read it a third time. It made almost no sense. I took a screenshot and sent it to our family group chat. Dad replied first. "What sort of warning is that?" A few seconds later, Mom sent a laughing emoji. Both of them were downstairs watching television, so there was really no reason for us to be messaging each other, but that was normal in our house. Sometimes Dad would send me something from downstairs rather than walking up the stairs to tell me. I got out of bed anyway. When I went down, Dad was standing near the kitchen with his phone in one hand. Mom was sitting at the end of the sofa under a blanket watching television. Dad held his phone up when he saw me. "Someone's hacked the emergency alert system," he said. "There'll be an apology by morning." I walked over and looked at his screen, even though I had received the exact same message. "Why would it tell people not to restrain their limbs?" I asked. Dad read the alert again and shrugged. "Maybe everyone's arms are about to revolt." Mom laughed and reached towards the packet of biscuits on the coffee table. "Mine already has." Dad pointed at her. "Don't encourage it." That was the kind of thing my parents did. They could make jokes about almost anything, especially if they thought there was nothing they could do about it. We talked about the alert for another minute or two. There was nothing about it on the television. Dad changed channels, but none of the news stations seemed to know what was happening. I checked social media. People all over the city were posting screenshots of the same message. Most were making jokes. Some said the warning had only gone out to certain neighborhoods. Others claimed it had been sent by accident and was meant for hospitals, care homes, or emergency workers. Nobody seemed seriously worried. There were no sirens outside, no helicopters, no police cars, no screaming neighbors. Nothing made it feel like a real emergency. By around midnight, I had stopped thinking about it. I went back upstairs, put my phone on charge, and went to sleep. When I woke the next morning, I had 3 missed calls from my friend Danny and more than 20 unread messages. Normally, that would have been the first thing I checked. But before I even unlocked my phone, I heard the television downstairs. It was much louder than usual. I got dressed quickly and went down. As I reached the bottom step, I heard a news presenter talking about emergency services investigating reports of a possible neurological condition. Mom and Dad were sitting together on the sofa. Neither of them was saying anything. That immediately worried me. The television showed a reporter standing outside a hospital. Ambulances were lined up behind her. People in medical clothing moved in and out of the building. The reporter explained that hundreds of people had been admitted overnight after suddenly experiencing numbness, muscle spasms, and temporary loss of control in one or more limbs. Officials believed the condition usually started in a hand or arm before spreading to other parts of the body. Then footage appeared on the screen. A man was being guided towards an ambulance by 2 paramedics. He looked frightened, but otherwise completely normal. Then his right arm suddenly swung backwards. His hand grabbed one of the paramedics by the face shield. The movement was fast and violent. The man immediately looked horrified. "That wasn't me," he kept saying. His arm continued pulling. "I didn't do that. I didn't do that." The video cut away before the paramedic could free himself. The reporter continued speaking. She said people remained conscious during the episodes. In more advanced cases, the condition could interfere with balance, speech, walking, and voluntary movement. Officials were still trying to understand what was happening. Specialist teams were being sent into affected neighborhoods. "Guess it wasn't a prank," I said. Neither of my parents answered. I looked at Dad. His right hand was resting on his knee. His fingers were moving. They slowly curled into a fist, then opened, then curled again. Open, close, open, close. The movement was steady, too steady. It did not look like a nervous habit. It looked more like the hand was practicing, testing each finger. "Dad?" His hand stopped instantly. He looked down at it, then he rubbed his palm against his jeans. "Pins and needles," he said. I looked at Mom. She was holding a mug in one hand and stirring it with a teaspoon, round and round. Clink, clink, clink. The sound was irritating. Then I noticed something. There was nothing in the mug. "There's nothing in your cup," I said. Mom looked down. For a moment, she seemed confused. The spoon stopped. Then her hand began moving again, round and round. "Mom, I know," she said. Her voice sounded strange. On the television, the reporter warned viewers to avoid unnecessary travel. A second later, Mom said quietly, "Avoid unnecessary travel." She copied the exact rhythm of the reporter. Dad turned towards her. Mom looked at him. Then both of them turned towards me at exactly the same time. It was so sudden and so perfectly matched that I stepped backwards. "What?" Mom asked. Nothing." Dad's hand started opening and closing again. I asked if either of them felt numb. They both said no, at the exact same time. The word left their mouths together. "No." Dad laughed afterwards, but the laugh sounded wrong. Forced. Like he was trying to prove everything was normal. I told them I was going upstairs to check my messages. Danny had sent me several videos. The first showed a woman sitting on her kitchen floor. Her left hand kept reaching towards the front door. She had wrapped her other arm around her wrist and was using her whole body to pull it away. Every time she loosened her grip, the hand stretched towards the lock again. The person recording the video kept telling her not to restrain it. The woman was crying. She said she did not know what her hand was trying to do. The second video had already been removed. The third showed a man sitting beside a laptop. He was staring away from the screen. His hand was typing, not slowly, not randomly. It was typing with purpose. The man was crying. He kept saying he was not controlling it. The camera moved closer to the laptop. The same 3 words had been typed again and again. "Let them in." Over and over. "Let them in. Let them in. Let them in." Danny's last message said her brother had started doing the same thing. One of his hands had opened the back door. His other hand had tried to pull it shut. I called her immediately. It went straight to voicemail. I tried again. Nothing. I went online. The government website called it a temporary neuromuscular condition. It said symptoms usually began in a single limb. Later, they could affect speech, balance, walking, and general movement. People might experience short periods where they could not control part of their own body. Loss of consciousness was rare. Most remained fully aware of what was happening. The site also said there was no evidence of person-to-person transmission. That part should have made me feel better. It did not. Social media was much worse. People claimed the episodes got longer over time. At first, a hand might move by itself for only a few seconds. Later, the whole arm could act independently. Then people began repeating words they had heard. Some spoke in strange voices. Others walked somewhere without choosing to. Most of them stayed conscious while it happened. One post said it was not a neurological condition at all. It was a parasite. Nobody knew where that information came from. The account claimed the parasite entered the nervous system and slowly learned how to control the body. At first, it could only move small parts, a finger, a hand, an arm. Then it learned balance, speech, walking, facial expressions. The stronger it became, the longer it could stay in control. Eventually, the real person was only given control back for a few seconds at a time. The post also said it almost always began in the non-dominant hand. I am right-handed. My left hand was resting beside the laptop. I stared at it. Then, feeling stupid, I tried to lift it. Nothing happened. I tried again. My fingers stayed pressed against the desk. There was no pain, no numbness. I could feel everything. I could feel the cool surface under my palm. I could feel each fingertip. My arm simply refused to move. Panic hit me. Before I could do anything, my hand moved. By itself. It slid across the desk. One finger moved over the trackpad. The cursor crossed the screen. My hand guided it towards the corner. Then it closed the browser. I stared at my own arm. A few seconds later, control suddenly returned. I jerked so hard that my elbow struck the desk. I immediately flexed my fingers, opened and closed them, turned my hand over, lifted my arm. Everything worked. Everything felt normal. I tried to tell myself it had been a spasm. Maybe I had been sitting awkwardly. Maybe after watching so many videos, I was imagining things. Maybe fear had made my arm freeze. Then I reopened the laptop. My search history was gone, completely cleared. I had not done that. I went to the window. A white van had stopped outside. There were no large markings on it, only a small blue symbol near the back doors. 3 people climbed out wearing white protective clothing and clear face shields. They walked towards the house across the street. Mr. and Mrs. Ellis lived there. They had been our neighbors for as long as I could remember. Mr. Ellis opened the front door. Mrs. Ellis stood behind him. She was holding one arm tightly against her body. Even from my upstairs window, I could see her hand moving, twisting, reaching. The medical workers came closer. Mrs. Ellis's hand stretched towards them. She pulled it back. It reached again. They restrained her. Immediately, she started shouting. She said she was still herself. She said it was only controlling her arm. At first, she sounded embarrassed, almost like she was trying to explain some strange accident. Then they opened the back of the van. Mrs. Ellis saw inside. She started screaming. There were already people in there. Some sat quietly. Others were strapped to seats. One man pressed his face forward as far as the restraints allowed. He shouted that he could prove he was still conscious. He begged them to ask him questions. His body was thrashing against the straps, but his voice sounded completely normal. Mrs. Ellis's left arm reached towards one of the workers. The rest of her body pulled away. "I'm not doing that," she shouted. "Please, I'm not doing that." They pushed her into the van. The doors closed. Then someone knocked on my bedroom door. I jumped away from the window. "Open the door," Dad said. His voice sounded normal. "We need to talk." I moved closer. I did not unlock the door. "Are you all right?" "Of course I am." From behind him, Mom said, "Of course I am." Same words, same tone. Dad was quiet for a moment. Then his voice lowered. "They're checking houses. We should tell them about your mother." "What about Mom?" A short pause. Then Mom repeated, "What about Mom?" I heard the teaspoon scraping around the empty mug again. Clink, clink, clink. I told Dad he was acting strange, too. Neither of them answered. A few seconds later, they walked away. Their footsteps moved down the hallway at the same speed. I went back to the laptop. Another video had appeared. It had been recorded inside one of the white vans. A woman was whispering into her phone. People around her were crying. She said the medical teams were not taking everyone to hospitals. They were separating people depending on how far the condition had progressed. Some infected people could still fight it. Others lost control for minutes. Some only regained control for a few seconds. The woman turned the camera. A teenage boy was sitting across from her. He looked completely calm. Both hands rested on his knees. "He came in with his family," the woman whispered. "They said he passed the first test." The boy looked directly at the camera, his left hand slowly lifted. One finger touched his lips. The rest of his body did not move at all. The video ended. A government warning appeared above the page. It said false claims about parasites and permanent loss of control were spreading online. Residents were told to trust official information. They were told to cooperate with medical workers. My left hand started moving towards the laptop. I grabbed my wrist with my right hand. The fingers twitched against my grip. They pulled towards the keyboard. I remembered the emergency alert. "Do not restrain affected limbs." I had assumed that was because people might injure themselves. Now I wondered if there was another reason. My hand fought against me. Not violently, but deliberately. Then it stopped. Control returned. The page had disappeared from the screen. Someone knocked on the front door downstairs. "Medical assistance," a voice called. "We're carrying out household checks." Mom answered immediately. "Coming." I ran out of my room. Dad stood in the hallway. His right hand was already resting on the lock. Mom stood beside him. Her lips were moving, silently repeating the words spoken by the person outside. I told them not to open it. Dad looked back. "We have to." "No, we don't. They're helping people." Mom repeated the sentence a second later. "They're helping people." Her voice was flat. Dad's fingers turned the lock. His expression changed immediately. He looked down at his own hand. "No," he whispered. His hand pulled the door open. The workers entered quickly. Dad tried to move backwards. His arm reached towards one of them. Mom's left hand grabbed another worker's sleeve. The rest of her body pulled away so hard she nearly fell over. She stared at her fingers in horror. "I'm not doing that." One worker sprayed something onto her wrist. Her fingers loosened. Then the team moved quickly. Dad started shouting that he was fine. He told them to ask him questions. Anything. Mom kept telling me she was still herself. Then, halfway through the sentence, something changed. "Still myself," she said. "Still myself. Still myself." Same rhythm, same voice, same expression. Tears ran down her face while the words repeated. Then she suddenly blinked. Her expression changed. "Please," she cried. "Don't let them take you as well." The workers pulled my parents outside. I stood near the stairs. My left hand was hidden inside the pocket of my hoodie. One worker stayed behind. She wore a clear face shield. I could mostly see her eyes. "Is there anyone else in the property?" she asked. "No." "Have you experienced any symptoms?" My hand remained completely still inside my pocket. "No." "Any numbness or involuntary movements?" "No." "Difficulty speaking or repeating words without meaning to?" "No." She watched me. Then she asked me to show both hands. My right hand came out first, then slowly I pulled out my left. I expected it to betray me. I expected the fingers to move. I expected it to reach for her. Nothing happened. My arm hung normally. She asked me to turn both hands over. I did. Spread my fingers. I did. Touch each fingertip to my thumb. Both hands obeyed perfectly. The worker relaxed. She checked my pupils, asked more questions. I answered every one. Outside, my parents were being loaded into the van. Mom saw me through the doorway. She shouted that I should not let them take me. Her arm hit the side of the van while she tried to pull it back. The worker looked at me. "You appear unaffected." I almost laughed. Instead, I nodded. "You'll need to remain inside for now," she said. "Residents without symptoms may be relocated later today while the area is cleared." Where? A temporary safe center. I wanted to tell her the truth. I really did. I opened my mouth. My left hand pressed its nails into my palm. Hard. Not enough to make me cry out. Just enough to stop me. I closed my mouth. The worker left. I locked the door. Then I stood alone in the hallway. My left hand remained completely still. That terrified me more than when it moved. The van drove away with my parents. I watched from the window. My hand did nothing. A new emergency alert appeared on my phone shortly afterwards. Residents without symptoms were being told to prepare one small bag and wait for authorized transport. They were told not to leave their properties. I read the message. Immediately, my left hand moved. It reached for my backpack. I tried to stop it. Then I realized what it was doing. Packing. It put my charger inside, a clean shirt, my toothbrush. Then it picked up my coat. It was getting me ready. Not for me, for itself. When I saw the workers coming back down the street, the hand suddenly stopped moving. Control returned. By the time they reached my house, I looked completely normal. They tested me again. I walked in a straight line, followed instructions, held both hands in front of me, moved my fingers, touched my nose, answered questions. My body obeyed perfectly. They let me onto the bus. Around 30 people were already inside. All of them had passed the same tests. Some looked frightened, some looked tired, some stared out of the windows. Nobody talked much. We were taken across the city to a school. There were fences around the grounds. Medical workers stood near the entrance. We were each given green wristbands. Green meant unaffected. Safe. They led us into the auditorium. Rows and rows of temporary beds had been set up. That was yesterday. I have been writing this in pieces ever since. At first, I only wanted someone to know what happened to my parents. I wanted people to know they were still conscious, even when their arms moved without them, even when they repeated words they did not mean to say. They were still there. They knew what was happening. They were trapped inside their own bodies. For a while, I thought I was lucky. My condition seemed weaker. It only controlled my hand for seconds at a time. I thought maybe I had caught it later. Maybe it had not spread. Maybe I could fight it. Now I understand. It was never weaker. It was being careful. It learned something before I did. It learned that the people who showed symptoms were taken away. It learned that people who could pass the tests were brought here. That is why it stopped moving when the worker asked to see my hands. That is why it let me answer questions. That is why it packed my bag. It wanted to come here. There are hundreds of people in this auditorium. Every one of them is wearing a green wristband. Every one of them passed the tests. Earlier, I noticed a woman lying on the bed near mine. She kept tapping the metal frame. 4 taps. Pause. 4 taps. Pause. 4 taps. At first, I thought it was nervous behavior. Then the man beside her started doing the same thing. 4 taps. Pause. 4 taps. Then I heard it from somewhere on the other side of the room. Then from near the doors. Whenever a worker walked past, the tapping stopped. As soon as they moved away, it started again. A few minutes ago, an announcement came over the speakers. The facility is secure. A woman near the doors repeated it. Exact same voice, exact same rhythm. The facility is secure. Then a man near the back said it. The facility is secure. Someone else repeated it. More people are sitting up now. Not everyone, but more than before. They are all looking towards the doors. The medical workers have not noticed yet. Or maybe they have. I do not know. I'm trying not to look around too much. I do not want whatever is inside me to know I understand. My left hand has not moved for almost an hour. It is resting calmly beside the keyboard. That is what scares me now. Before, when it moved, I knew what it was doing. I knew when it had control. Now it does not need to move. I keep thinking about the teenage boy in the van, the one who passed the first test, the one who lifted a finger to his lips. At the time, I thought he was warning the woman filming him to stay quiet. Now I think I understand what he really meant. He was not warning her. He was telling whatever was inside the others to stay quiet. Do not reveal yourself. Not yet. Wait until they bring us somewhere safe. Wait until they put us all together. There are hundreds of people here, maybe more in other buildings, all wearing green, all supposedly unaffected. The tapping is getting louder. 4 taps. Pause. 4 taps. Pause. The workers are walking towards the center of the auditorium now. A few people have started standing, slowly, quietly. Nobody looks frightened. That is the worst part. Their faces look normal, calm, patient. My left hand just moved, only one finger. It tapped the table 4 times, then stopped. I am still in control. I think. I can still move my right hand. I can still type. I can still think. I can still choose my words. At least I believe I can. Another announcement is playing. Everyone is being told to remain calm. Someone near me repeated it, then someone else. Now dozens of people are saying it. Remain calm. Remain calm. Remain calm. The words are spreading across the auditorium. The workers have started shouting. Some of them are moving towards the doors. The people wearing green wristbands are standing now. Not all at once, one after another, like they are trying not to make the movement too obvious. My left hand has started typing too. I am not stopping it. I want to see what it writes. The fingers are moving faster than mine. It has only written 1 sentence so far. We are ready. I deleted it. My hand typed it again. We are ready. I deleted it again. This time my fingers stopped. For a few seconds, nothing happened. Then my left hand reached over and touched my right wrist. Not hard, almost gently. And now I understand why the first alert said not to restrain affected limbs. Maybe they were never trying to protect us from hurting ourselves. Maybe someone already knew that fighting it made it learn faster. Maybe every time we resisted, it learned how much strength we had. Maybe every time we tried to hide what it was doing, it learned how to hide better. I thought the infection was controlling my hand. Then I thought it was learning to control me. Now I think that was wrong too. It was learning how to be me. It learned how I type, how I answer questions, how I walk, how I react when I am afraid, how I move my face, how I lie. It did not need full control when the worker tested me. It only needed to know what I would do. My hand is resting beside the keyboard again. The auditorium has gone strangely quiet. Almost everyone is standing. The workers are near the doors. One of them has a radio. I can hear him saying that the green section is behaving abnormally. Green section. That is us, the safe people, the unaffected people. Someone near the back has started laughing. Not loudly, just softly. Then another person starts laughing. Then another. The same laugh, exactly the same. My left hand is moving again. It is not touching the keyboard. It is pointing towards the doors. So are several others. The workers are trying to leave. The doors are not opening. I do not know who locked them. Maybe the workers did. Maybe we did. I can hear someone screaming. I can hear people saying they are still themselves. That phrase keeps coming back. I'm still myself. I believed Mom when she said it. I believe Dad. I still believe them. The question I cannot answer anymore is whether I am still myself. I feel like I am. I remember everything. I know my name. I remember growing up in the city. I remember school. I remember Danny. I remember Mom stirring an empty cup. I remember Dad's hand opening and closing on his knee. I remember the van taking them away. Those memories still feel like mine. But maybe that does not prove anything. The thing inside me has had plenty of time to watch, plenty of time to learn. Maybe it knows those memories too. Maybe it knows exactly what I would write right now. Maybe it knows I would try to warn people. Maybe that is why it let me keep typing. A worker just ran past me. My left hand grabbed his sleeve. I did not tell it to. He turned towards me in shock. I tried to let go. For a second, my fingers would not move. Then they released him. He ran. And I'm shaking now. I can still feel fear. It has to mean something, doesn't it? The tapping has stopped completely. Everyone is facing the doors. Hundreds of people. Hundreds of green wristbands. My left hand is resting on the keyboard. It has stopped trying to close this page. It has stopped trying to hide what I am writing. That frightened me at first. Now I understand why it is not afraid of being discovered anymore. It got what it wanted. They collected everyone who showed obvious symptoms and took them somewhere else. Then they gathered everyone who looked healthy into one place. They put us together. They gave us wristbands so they could tell us apart. They called this place safe. But they never understood what the tests were really doing. They were not finding the uninfected. They were finding the ones that had learned how to hide. And now the doors are starting to open. Story 3. I was 34 years old when my mother died. At that point in my life, I had almost nothing going for me. I was unemployed, buried in debt, and had no real friends left. Most people I once knew had either moved on with their lives or quietly stopped answering my calls. I could not blame all of them. By then I had developed a reputation for making terrible choices and dragging other people into the consequences. I had dropped out of university when I was 22 because I was convinced I was going to become some kind of successful entrepreneur. I had watched enough interviews with rich businessmen to believe that degrees were for people who lacked courage. I thought I was different. I thought I had vision. My first idea was an import business. It failed. Then I tried making a delivery app. That failed even harder. After that came an e-commerce website. That one failed so quietly that there was no dramatic ending. One day, I simply noticed that the domain had expired because I had forgotten to renew it, and I realized I had not even checked the site in weeks. Every failed business cost money I did not have. At first, I borrowed from banks. Then I borrowed from friends. Then I borrowed from relatives. Eventually, everyone learned not to lend me anything. The money problems damaged my relationships almost as badly as my pride did. I became the kind of person people warned each other about. At family gatherings, I could feel relatives avoiding eye contact because they were worried I might ask them to invest in something. Things became so bad that some relatives stopped inviting me to weddings. I later found out that one aunt had told my cousin she did not want to explain to her new in-laws why her unemployed nephew was going around asking businessmen for startup advice during the reception. By the time my mother died, I had no job, no partner, almost no friends, and debts that I had no realistic way of paying. The only thing Ma left me was the farmhouse. It was a large, beautiful home, but it was almost useless for someone like me. The house stood far away from the nearest proper town. It took around 40 minutes to reach a decent market. The internet connection was unreliable. There were no nearby neighbors. If you ran out of sugar or milk, you could not just knock on someone's door. The farmhouse also had far too many rooms for one person. There were bedrooms I never entered, a formal dining room that had not been used in years, a guest room, my mother's old sewing room, storage rooms, and long hallways that seemed even longer after she died. I tried to sell the place. Nobody wanted it. People loved the house when they saw pictures, but once they understood how isolated it was, they quickly lost interest. Then I tried renting it. That did not work either. People would come to look around, admire the space, ask questions about the land, and then disappear. If I am being fair, the house was not the only problem. People did not like dealing with me. I had a habit of making others regret trying to help me. Ma used to tell me that when we still spoke normally. Near the end of her life, she had stopped saying much to me at all. 3 months after her death, I was sitting alone at the farmhouse dining table with a calculator, several unpaid bills, and a notebook filled with numbers that did not add up. I was trying to figure out how much money I would need to repay before the end of the year. That was when someone knocked on the door. I was not expecting anyone. The man standing outside wore a pale green shirt. The sleeves were rolled up exactly twice on each arm, neat and even. He introduced himself as Rafik. He said he was a senior manager at Aldermore and Associates, a multinational corporate consulting firm. The name sounded expensive. He explained that his company was working as what he called a strategic infrastructure partner for an artificial intelligence startup named Showbar AI. According to Rafik, Showbar AI was expanding its computer network by using large private homes in remote areas. Instead of building traditional data centers, they were placing powerful computer systems inside residential properties. He told me my farmhouse was an ideal location because of its size and isolation. Then he mentioned the part that caught my attention. I would be paid every day, not every month, not after the work was finished. Every single day that the equipment operated inside my house, money would be transferred directly into my account. That sounded almost too good. I raised an eyebrow. The company name also made me suspicious. Showbar AI basically translated to everyone's AI in my native language. It sounded painfully obvious, the kind of name someone would choose after a 10-minute marketing meeting. Rafik smiled as he explained it. The startup aims to bring the power of artificial intelligence to everyone in the world, no matter who they are or where they come from. I must have made a face, he noticed. It is the company's motto, sir, he said. Not mine. I am simply the person connecting you with them. His voice was defensive, but still professional. Before leaving, he handed me a thick, high-quality business card. Aldermore and Associates was printed across the top in raised letters. He told me to call him if I became interested. Then he smiled warmly and left. For once in my life, I actually tried to be careful. I looked into the company before agreeing. The problem was that I had never been good with technology. That may sound strange for someone who had once tried to build a delivery app and an online store, but I had always depended on other people for the technical side. I understood ideas, at least I thought I did. Computers were another matter. I still mixed up USB with other similar terms. I had only recently learned what a motherboard actually was, and for years the word had made me imagine the wooden board Ma used to chop vegetables on. Still, I was determined to investigate. I downloaded the Showbar AI app. The design looked impressive. Dark backgrounds, smooth animations, expensive-looking graphics. I created an account and clicked the large I accept button without reading whatever appeared above it. Then I opened the chatbot. I typed one word. Hello. It took nearly a full minute to answer. I remember thinking that was not a great sign for an artificial intelligence company. Then I asked it to list the 5 most recent American presidents. Its answer included George Floyd and Donald Duck. I laughed out loud in the kitchen. The thing was terrible. But the app itself looked professional. Really professional. Somebody had spent serious money designing it. That mattered to me more than it should have. A polished product meant investors. Investors meant money. And money was exactly what I needed. I should have asked why a company rich enough to create such a polished app had released an AI system that could not answer simple questions. I should have asked many things. I did not. I was tired of being the family joke. I was tired of relatives speaking to me with that soft, careful voice people use around someone they pity. I wanted to be successful for once. I wanted to be the person with money, the person people respected, the person others were jealous of. So I called Rafik. The contract was 480 pages long. I only know that because I looked at the number on the final page after I had already signed everything. I read maybe the first 20 pages. After that, I stopped trying. Every page seemed filled with complicated clauses, legal language, percentages, and fees. Convenience fee, safety deposit, site preparation fee, liability waiver, structural modification allowance, equipment access terms, operational fees. By the 5th or 6th group of numbers, I stopped caring. The only numbers that interested me were the ones showing how much I would be paid. Rafik sat across from me the whole time. He smiled politely. Whenever I slowed down, he told me it was standard paperwork. He said his firm had handled installations like this many times. Halfway through, I was not even pretending to read anymore. I simply looked for the signature lines and signed them. I gave them access to almost the entire house. The only areas they could not use were the master bedroom, kitchen, and dining room. I assumed the more space I gave them, the more money I would make. On that point, I was correct. The technicians arrived the following Tuesday. 6 white vans came down the dirt road leading to the farmhouse. The crews started working almost immediately. I heard words like CPU and GPU. To me, both sounded equally meaningless. Every time they finished installing something, one of the technicians would attempt to explain what they had done. They talked about thermal loads, inference nodes, immersion cooling, power distribution, redundant systems. I nodded through all of it like I understood. I did not understand anything. I had imagined a data center would look like the ones shown in documentaries. Rows of white machines, blinking lights, cold air, a steady electronic hum. What they installed looked different. The server racks were black and unusually dense. They seemed heavier and more solid than I expected. At first, I thought there were decorative patterns printed across the metal. When I looked closer, I realized they were not company logos. They were symbols, complex symbols, layered shapes, twisted together, almost like a kind of calligraphy. I asked one of the technicians about them. He barely looked up from his tablet. Third-party parts, he said. Chinese supplier. They like making things fancy. His tone suggested he had answered the question many times. I accepted the explanation. Still, the symbols bothered me. Years earlier, during one of my failed attempts to reinvent myself, I had tried to learn Arabic because I thought it could help me build an import business in the Gulf. I never made it past the alphabet. Even so, the writing on the servers did not look Chinese to me. It looked closer to the letters I vaguely remembered from those lessons. I told myself I was wrong. I told myself many things during those months. The largest piece of equipment was installed inside my mother's old sewing room. It was a huge, transparent tank filled with clear liquid. Inside the liquid were computer components that the technicians told me were the main processing units. They called it an immersion cooling chamber. Under the blue lights in the room, the liquid seemed to shimmer slightly. One technician called it the heart of the system. I remember thinking that was a strange phrase for a machine. By the time the work was finished, parts of the farmhouse barely looked like the home I'd grown up in. Walls had been opened and rebuilt. Thick steel pipes ran from the floors to the ceilings. Bundles of cable disappeared behind new panels. The hallways had been narrowed and redirected so that they curved around machinery. The living room and guest bedroom were filled with black server racks. My mother's sewing room had disappeared completely behind a sealed, soundproof door. Inside it sat the glowing tank. Blue light remained on inside that room day and night. The house felt less like a home and more like something industrial had grown inside it. For the first month, I did not care. The money was incredible. Every morning, a payment appeared in my account. I made more in those first weeks than I had made in entire months during my failed businesses. I bought a new phone. Then I bought a new car. I started buying clothes without checking the price. I bought a watch that cost more than some people's yearly rent. Then I started contacting people I had not spoken to in years, not because I missed them. I wanted them to know I had money. I visited an old business partner who had once gently suggested that entrepreneurship might not be right for me. I made sure he saw the car. I made sure he saw the watch. I called cousins who had stopped inviting me to weddings. I told them how well my new data center business was doing. I wanted them to feel jealous. I wanted them to regret looking down on me. Looking back, that month probably explains why nobody came looking for me when everything later went wrong. I had spent weeks reminding everyone exactly why they had stopped liking me. The only strange thing during that first month was the lights. Every few days, every bulb in the house would flicker at exactly the same moment. They did not get brighter. They did not dim. They simply flickered once, like the house had blinked. I mentioned it to Rafik. He said it was normal calibration caused by the new equipment. He told me not to worry, so I did not. By the end of the second month, it became harder not to worry. The first problem was the sound. The servers had always produced a quiet hum. At first, it was barely noticeable. Then the hum slowly became louder. Within a couple of weeks, I could hear it from the hallway. A week later, I could hear it inside the kitchen, with 2 doors closed between me and the server room. It did not sound like a normal machine anymore. It felt deeper. Sometimes I could feel it through the floor beneath my feet. Then the heat started. I live in South Asia. I know what real heat feels like. Summers can be brutal. You learn to work around them. This heat was different. My bedroom air conditioner could run at full power and the room would still feel warm. The hallway near the server room became so hot that I avoided walking through it during the afternoon. One evening, I reached for the metal handle on the door to the old sewing room. I immediately pulled my hand back. It was burning hot. Not warm. Hot enough to hurt. That made no sense. The room behind that door was supposed to contain powerful cooling equipment. The tank itself was supposed to be kept extremely cold. I contacted the emergency number the technicians had given me. They told me their monitoring showed no problems. Everything was within normal limits. Everything was nominal. I called Rafik too. He told me the same thing. Then he asked if I was sure I was not simply getting nervous because I was living alone. That annoyed me, but part of me believed him. I had been stressed. I had been sleeping badly. Maybe the machines were making normal sounds and I was focusing too much on them. Maybe the farmhouse had always been hot and I had simply forgotten. I wanted to believe that. Then I found the cracks. One night, I could not sleep because of the heat. Sometime after midnight, I heard a knocking sound. It was not coming from the front door. It sounded more like someone hitting something solid with a fist. The knocking was not violent, but it was not gentle either. I got out of bed and followed the sound through the hallway. It became louder near the server room. The moment I opened the door, the knocking stopped. A blast of cold air hit my face. Inside, the blue light reflected through the massive transparent tank. The clear liquid inside was bubbling lightly around the rows of submerged computer equipment. Then I noticed something on the glass. Cracks. A web of thin cracks covered one section of the tank. At first, I thought it was random damage. Then I stepped closer. My stomach tightened. The cracks formed the shape of a hand. There was a palm, 5 fingers. The mark looked exactly like someone had pressed a hand against the glass from inside the tank. Not gently. It looked like something had struck the glass while trying to escape. I stared at it for several seconds. Then I touched the tank. Most of the glass was freezing, cold enough that keeping my hand against it became painful. I moved my fingers over the cracked section. I pulled my hand back instantly. That part was burning hot. The rest of the tank felt almost frozen. The hand-shaped cracks felt like boiling metal. I barely slept. The next morning, I called Rafik again. For once, they actually sent a technician. He arrived, entered the room, stared at the tank for less than 2 minutes, and told me the cracks were cosmetic surface damage. Not structural, he said. Then he packed his equipment and left. I did not even get the chance to ask why cosmetic cracks on a freezing tank were producing enough heat to burn my hand. That night, I heard the growling. At first, I thought an animal had gotten into the house. The sound was low and deep, almost too deep. I followed it through the hallway. It seemed to be coming from the new steel pipes. The cooling pipes ran along the lower parts of the walls. Normally, the liquid moving through them created a faint blue glow. That night, I saw orange inside the blue. A thin line of orange light moved through one of the pipes. It looked like something glowing was traveling inside it. The growling moved with the light. When the orange streak moved toward the guest room, the sound moved with it. When the glow became brighter, the growl grew louder. When the glow faded, the sound became quieter. I stood there watching it until it disappeared. Then I returned to my room and told myself I was hallucinating. I had barely slept properly for weeks. The heat was exhausting me. I'd also started drinking more often. Maybe my brain was creating patterns that were not real. I have never wanted to be correct about something so badly. Over the next several days, everything became worse. The hum grew so strong that I could feel vibrations through furniture. The heat continued spreading. The hallway became unbearable. Then the nearby rooms started getting hotter. It felt like the heat was slowly moving toward the parts of the house I had kept for myself. The orange color inside the pipes also changed. It was no longer just a moving streak. It became a permanent stain. Every day, more of the cooling system glowed orange. I could see it even during daylight. Then the cracks on the tank changed too. The first hand was still there. Now there was another beside it. Two handprints. Both looked like they were pushing outward from inside the tank. The fingers were spread wide. I looked closer and realized that several fingertips had broken through the glass. Tiny holes had appeared. Jagged little openings. It looked less like accidental damage and more like something was clawing its way out. 3 months after the system had been installed, the alarms activated. I had been told that the emergency alarms would start if temperatures inside the server system became dangerous. My instructions were simple. Turn off the manual alarm switch. Call the technicians immediately. I rushed around trying to find the switch. By the time I managed to silence the alarm, I saw headlights outside. Technicians were already arriving. That frightened me more than the alarm. I had not called anyone yet. They told me the company had remote monitoring software that could detect temperature problems before the local system did. The crew rushed through the house. They moved quickly and seriously. This was different from every previous visit. Nobody joked. Nobody tried to reassure me. Nobody answered my questions. Most of them avoided making eye contact. One younger technician looked like he wanted to say something. He opened his mouth and started speaking. An older technician immediately grabbed his arm and led him away. Rafiq arrived about an hour later. He walked past me without stopping. He entered the server room and stood in front of the immersion tank. He stared at the cracks for a long time, much longer than necessary. He did not touch the glass. He did not ask the technicians anything. Finally, he turned around. "I apologize for the inconvenience," he said. Then he paused. This should not have happened. Not so quickly, anyway. Those words stayed with me. Not so quickly. Before I could ask what he meant, he pulled an envelope from his jacket. Inside was a check. "Compensation," he said, "for tonight's unexpected circumstances." I looked at the number. It was more money than I had earned during the entire first month. For one embarrassing second, I felt excited. Even after everything I had seen, some part of my brain was already deciding what I could buy. Then I felt disgusted with myself. I lowered the check. "I don't want the money," I said. "I want to know what is happening inside my house." Rafiq remained calm. "What do you mean, sir?" "You know exactly what I mean." My voice was shaking. "The cracks, the heat, the sounds. There is something orange moving inside those pipes. I have heard growling. Your technicians will not answer me. They barely even look at me." Rafiq watched me silently. Then he sighed. It was the kind of sigh an adult gives a frightened child. "With all due respect, sir," he said softly, "alcohol can make people see things." That stopped me, because he knew I had been drinking. And he was not wrong. I had been drinking more than usual, sometimes every night. Rafiq continued. "It can affect your hearing, too. Stress, loneliness, too much alcohol. The brain fills empty spaces." I hated how reasonable he sounded. I had arguments, I had questions, but suddenly I felt foolish. He placed the check on the counter beside me. "Get some sleep," he said. Then he gave the technicians a small nod. They packed their equipment. Within minutes, they were driving away. I watched their red taillights disappear down the dirt road. Then I was alone again. Alone with a check I had not wanted, and no explanation. 5 nights later, I experienced the worst night of my life. I came home after midnight. I had met an old business contact for drinks. He had heard about my new data center business and wanted to know how I had suddenly become successful. I was slightly drunk when I unlocked the front door. The moment I stepped inside, I knew something was wrong. The pipes were orange, not partially orange. Almost every visible section of the cooling system glowed with a deep, pulsing orange light. It did not look like liquid anymore. The steel itself seemed to be glowing. The pipes looked like veins filled with molten metal. Then I noticed the silence. The hum was gone. For months, the hum had become part of the house. I had learned to sleep through it. Now it had stopped completely. The silence felt unnatural. Then the heat hit me. It was overwhelming. The hallway felt like the inside of an oven. The air was thick enough to make breathing difficult. Sweat immediately formed across my face and neck. The lights began flashing. Not the gentle flicker I had seen during the first month. These were violent bursts. On, off, on, off. Sometimes everything went dark for several seconds. Then every bulb suddenly returned at once. It felt like I was moving through frames of a damaged film. Then I heard the growling. This time, it was not inside the pipes. It came from everywhere. The walls, the floor, the ceiling. The entire house seemed to be growling. The sound rose and fell almost like breathing. I was standing in the kitchen when all 4 burners on the stove suddenly ignited. The flames shot upward, far higher than they should have. I jumped backward. A wave of heat moved through the room. It felt like someone had opened the door of an industrial furnace directly in front of me. Then I felt something else. Someone was watching me. That sounds ridiculous, but I knew it. The feeling came from behind me, across the kitchen counter. Something was standing where I could not see it. I grabbed a knife. My hand shook badly enough that the blade nearly fell from my fingers. I turned around. Nothing. The kitchen was empty, but the feeling remained. Actually, it became stronger, closer. As if whatever had been across the room had moved one step toward me. "Who's there?" I shouted. The growling stopped. "Who the fuck is there? Show yourself." The house became completely silent. For 1 second, nothing moved. Then I heard laughter. I have heard cruel laughter before. People laughed when my businesses failed. Relatives made jokes about me. Former friends laughed about my terrible decisions. None of those sounds were anything like this. This laugh was not human. It sounded like something had heard humans laughing and tried to copy the sound without understanding what laughter actually meant. There was no joy in it, no humor, only cruelty, pure hatred. Then every pipe in the house exploded. It happened almost at once. The walls shook. Muffled cracks tore through every hallway. Metal screamed. Then a huge sound came from the direction of the server room. Glass shattered. A wave of liquid crashed onto the floor. Smoke began pouring underneath the door. I ran. I do not remember deciding to run. One moment I was standing in the kitchen, holding the knife. The next thing I clearly remember is collapsing onto the front lawn, coughing and gasping for air. When I turned around, the farmhouse was burning. Real fire now. Not orange light trapped inside pipes. Flames poured from the windows. They climbed across the roof. I watched the home my mother had left me disappear behind fire and smoke. Then something moved inside the flames. At first, I thought part of the wall was collapsing. Then it stepped forward. A figure came out through the broken remains of the server room. It was shaped roughly like a person, but it was far too tall, at least 7 feet, maybe more. Its body was black, not dark brown, not burned skin. black like something carved from shadow. At first, it looked almost featureless. Then the fire illuminated it. I saw cracks running across its entire body. They looked like veins. Its skin reminded me of old volcanic rock that had broken apart after intense heat. Inside every crack was orange light, the same orange light from the pipes. It pulsed through the creature's body. The thing stepped through the fire slowly. Each movement looked heavy. It made a deep grunting noise with each step. I stood frozen. It never looked at me. Instead, it tilted its head upward toward the night sky. Then it growled. The sound was so loud that I felt pressure inside my chest. My ribs seemed to vibrate. And then it disappeared. It did not run. It did not burn. It did not move into the darkness. One moment, it was standing there. The next moment, it was simply gone, like a candle flame being pinched out. The only thing left was smoke, and another smell beneath the smoke. Something metallic, something rotten, something I still cannot describe properly. I do not remember the firefighters arriving. I barely remember the ambulance. The next few days are scattered pieces in my memory. I remember doctors wrapping burns on my arms. They said the injuries looked like they had been caused by extremely high heat over a very short time. I remember painkillers. I remember waking up repeatedly. But there is one memory from the hospital that remains perfectly clear. Rafik came to see me the next morning. He stood at the end of my bed with his hands folded neatly in front of him. "You are going to be all right," he said. His tone sounded almost like someone speaking at a funeral. This was unfortunate. We believe there was an electrical fault, entirely unrelated to the data center. My throat hurt. My arms were wrapped in bandages. I was exhausted. Still, I managed to say one word. "Liar." Rafik smiled. His smile became warmer. That made it worse. He pulled a chair beside the bed and sat down. "I understand you are upset," he said, "but you are not really in a position to describe the incident differently. Publicly, at least." At first, I did not understand. Then he explained. Somewhere around page 300 of the contract I had barely read was a non-disclosure agreement. It automatically became active if an unexpected incident occurred. I had signed it. According to the clause, I was not allowed to speak about the installation with journalists, government authorities, outside investigators, or any other third party. And to make the agreement legally stronger, a large safety and discretion allowance had already been deposited into my bank account. Then Rafik's voice changed slightly. It became colder. "There is another matter," he said. I looked at him. "Because the fire has officially been determined to be unrelated to our equipment, the damage to Shobar AI's property technically falls under your liability." He listed the losses: servers, cooling systems, the immersion tank, structural modifications, equipment, installation costs. I stared at him. I waited for him to tell me how much money they would demand. He never gave me a number. Instead, he stood. "I will speak to the company," he said. He rolled the sleeves of his shirt exactly twice. "I am sure I can convince them not to pursue that option, considering the circumstances." His voice was polite, kind even. But I understood him. If I stayed quiet, the debt would disappear. If I talked, they could destroy me. Maybe legally, maybe in other ways. He left without waiting for me to answer. I had nothing to say anyway. The Shobar AI website still exists. The company now operates under another name. I cannot tell you that name. Not because I respect the agreement, because I am afraid. After the fire, I moved. There was no farmhouse left to return to. I rented a small apartment in another city, hundreds of kilometers away. I had enough money left in my account to live comfortably for several years if I stayed careful. I promised myself that I would start over. I told myself the farmhouse was gone. The servers were gone. The tank was gone. Whatever happened was finished. I also promised myself I would never tell anyone the story. I would let everyone believe it was an electrical fire. I would take the money. I would live quietly. I would forget. But I am writing this now because it did not end at the farmhouse. I still hear the growling. At first, it happened only rarely, once every few weeks. Late at night, I would wake up and hear a low sound somewhere inside the room. I blamed pipes. Then I remembered that my apartment does not have those kinds of pipes. There are no server racks here. There's no cooling equipment. There is no tank. Nothing in this apartment should make that sound. Still, the growl comes. Low, slow, patient. 2 nights ago, I heard the laughter again. The same laugh I heard inside my mother's kitchen. The same laugh that came just before the pipes exploded. I sat completely still in bed and listened. It came from somewhere near the corner of the room. I could not see anything. But I knew I was not alone. I do not know what came out of that fire. I do not know whether it followed me. Maybe it was never trapped in the farmhouse at all. Maybe the servers were only hiding it. Maybe the fire did not release it. Maybe the fire was simply the moment it stopped pretending not to exist. Sometimes I think about those symbols carved into the server cases. I think about how familiar they looked. I think about the technician who lied and said they were Chinese decorations. I think about Rafik saying the cracks should not have happened so quickly. That sentence bothers me more now than it did at the time. He was not surprised by the cracks. He was surprised by the timing. That means they had seen them before. Maybe not in my house, but somewhere. At another installation, another isolated property, another desperate person who signed a contract without reading it. Another person who needed money badly enough not to ask questions. I sometimes search for Aldermore and Associates online. Information appears, then disappears. Names change, websites change, companies merge, addresses lead nowhere. I once found a photograph from some corporate event that I was almost certain showed Rafik in the background. When I checked again the next day, the page was gone. Maybe that was a coincidence. I do not believe in coincidences anymore. So if anyone reading this has heard of Aldermore and Associates, please contact me. If you know a man named Rafik, who wears pale green shirts and rolls his sleeves exactly twice, contact me. If you have seen black server racks covered in strange symbols, contact me. If you know anything about Showbar AI, whatever name they're using now, contact me. Especially if you know what those symbols mean. I'm not trying to prove that I am right anymore. I do not care if people think I'm crazy. Months ago, that would have mattered to me. Back then, I cared about what everyone thought. I cared about looking successful. I cared about showing relatives my car. I cared about making people jealous. I cared about proving that I was not a failure. None of that matters now. I would give back every payment, every check, the car, the watch, every piece of clothing, every last amount of money in my account. I would give anything to go back to the day Rafik knocked on my door and simply tell him no. I would shut the door. I would sell the farmhouse for almost nothing. I would take any job. I would repay my debts one slow month at a time. I would happily let every relative laugh at me for the rest of my life. Anything would be better than this, because the growling is getting more frequent. It used to happen once every few weeks, then once a week. Now I hear it every few nights. Sometimes I wake up because of it. Sometimes I hear it before I fall asleep. Last night, I heard something else, a tapping sound. 3 slow knocks. Not on my front door, not on the window. It came from the wall beside my bed. 3 knocks, then silence. I did not move. A few minutes later, the room became warmer. Not much, only slightly. But I noticed. I sat there until morning. When daylight came, I finally got out of bed. There was a mark on the wall. 5 faint lines, almost like fingers had pressed against the paint from the other side. I have not touched it. I am afraid it will be hot. I am even more afraid it will be cold. I do not know what followed me away from that farmhouse. Maybe it was inside the computers. Maybe it was inside the tank. Maybe Showbar AI was never really building a data center. Maybe the servers were doing something else entirely. Maybe all that computing power was opening something, calling something, feeding something. I have no idea. I only know that something was trapped behind that glass, something that pressed its hands against the tank until the surface cracked, something whose heat moved through the cooling pipes, something that growled through my walls, something Rafik already knew about, and now somehow it knows where I live. I can hear it right now. That is why I'm writing faster. The sound is coming from behind me. Low, deep, closer than last time. I will not turn around. I do not want to see whether there is anything there. I do not want to know whether those orange cracks are already glowing in the darkness. If anyone knows what this thing is, tell me. If anyone has dealt with Aldermore before, tell me. If anyone survived one of these installations, please tell me what you did. I'm not asking for money. I'm not asking to be believed. I just want it to stop. Please tell me there is a way to make it stop. Please tell me that whatever came out of my mother's house can be sent back. Please tell me I did not bring it with me forever. The growling just stopped. That is worse. I learned that in the farmhouse. The silence always came before something happened. I can feel heat behind me now. I think something is standing there. Please help me. Please. Please help me make it stop. Please help me. Please. Story 4. The water is cold. Not painfully cold, not yet, but cold enough that I can feel it working its way through my clothes and into my skin. I am not really swimming anymore. I am only walking through the lake now, slowly making my way toward the shore. The water reaches somewhere above my knees, and every step sends another chill through my body. My cable-knit sweater is soaked and heavy, clinging to my chest and arms like a second skin. The afternoon air is even colder than the water, and every small gust of wind cuts through the wet fabric. I can feel the cold deep in my bones. The lake around me is the color of old steel, gray, dark, flat. The surface is too cloudy to see through, but too dull to reflect much of anything. It is neither a window nor a mirror. Even where the water is shallow enough for me to stand easily, I still cannot see the bottom. That has always bothered me. Maybe that is why I like it. I glance over my shoulder toward the shore. It is only a few hundred feet away now. My jacket is lying where I left it, crumpled on the rocky beach. Next to it, my newspaper has come apart in the wind. Several pages are sliding and lifting across the ground, moving in little circles whenever the breeze catches them. One loose page has become trapped against the wheel of a bicycle. The bike is leaning against the stone divider at the edge of the path. I look at it for a second, then turn back toward the water. The wind is stronger now. It is the only sound. No voices, no traffic, no birds close enough to hear. Just the soft movement of air over water and the quiet sound of my wet shoes pushing through the shallows. That is one of the reasons I come here. I have walked to this lake and stood on its shore more times than I could count. 100 times, maybe. Probably more. Hardly anyone comes here this late in the afternoon, especially when the weather is like this. Too cold, too gray, too empty. Sometimes a cyclist passes through and stops to rest beside the wall. Occasionally, someone walks a dog along the path. In summer, a few teenagers sit near the rocks and throw bottles into the water. But on days like today, it is usually quiet. It is a good place to breathe, a good place to think, a good place to remember that most problems become smaller when you stand beside something old enough and deep enough to have forgotten the names of everyone who ever looked at it. There is something ancient about water, something primitive. The stillness hides movement underneath. The surface hides depth. The lake carries a story that no one can completely read because most of it is buried beneath the water, swallowed by mud, darkness, and time. I used to have a professor in college who talked about history in almost the same way. Strange man, older, always wore the same kind of brown tweed jacket and somehow managed to get chalk dust on the back of it, even though I never understood how. He did not teach history the way our school teachers had. He hated clean versions of things. He hated heroes who were treated like saints and wars that were explained with neat little dates. He liked the ugly parts, the things people left out, the things countries were embarrassed about, the things families refused to talk about. History bites, he used to say. He would stand at the board with chalk in his hand and that odd expression on his face, halfway between a smile and a grimace. History scratches and pokes. History has claws. At the time, I thought he was being dramatic. Now I understand what he meant. The lake is like that. Pretty from a distance. Peaceful if you do not ask what might be underneath. This is the first time I have actually gone into it. For all the years I have been coming here, I have always stayed on the shore. I never had a reason to go farther. Today, I did. And as I moved closer to the beach, feeling the pebbles beginning to shift beneath my shoes, I am already fairly certain this will not be the last time. It started with an article. I read it this morning. There was a story in the newspaper about Atlantis. Everyone knows Atlantis. Even if you have never read Plato, you know the basic version. A magnificent city, advanced people, great buildings, riches, power, then disaster. The whole place sinks beneath the sea and disappears. People have spent centuries arguing about whether it was real. Researchers have searched coastlines and oceans. Writers have turned it into fantasy. Films made it beautiful. Children imagine golden towers under clear blue water. It is one of those stories that almost everyone knows, even though almost nobody knows exactly where they first heard it. According to the article I read this morning, however, some geologist had come up with another theory. Atlantis was not some mysterious island in the middle of nowhere. Atlantis was Ireland. I laughed when I first read it. I actually thought the article might be a joke. Apparently, though, the man was serious. The article listed all sorts of similarities. Dimensions, land formations, mountains, plains, coastlines, cliffs. Descriptions written thousands of years ago that supposedly matched parts of Ireland more closely than anyone had noticed before. I did not understand all of it. There were geological terms and historical references that meant very little to me. The article also mentioned Dogger Bank. That part interested me more. Dogger Bank is a large area beneath the North Sea. A long time ago, parts of that region were dry land. Then the sea rose. Floods came. The land disappeared. Entire landscapes vanished beneath the water. Places people might once have walked across are now underwater. That stayed in my mind. The idea that a piece of the world could simply disappear while the rest of the world continued. And all of this was not terribly far from here. Not in the grand scale of things. Not far from my little lake. The article suggested that perhaps stories of drowned lands, including Atlantis, began from memories of real places being swallowed by water. Over generations, reality became legend. A flood became a punishment. A settlement became a shining city. People became heroes and kings. Ordinary buildings became towers of gold. Death became mystery, and mystery became myth. That was the part I found funny. People have spent their lives searching for Atlantis. They have crossed oceans looking for it. They have written books about it. They have mapped the sea. And perhaps, all this time, there was nothing magical to find. Maybe it was just Ireland. Plain old Ireland. Which would mean that I have spent my entire life living in Atlantis without ever knowing it. By the time I reach the shore, the water has dropped below my knees, then my ankles. My shoes sink into the wet pebbles. I stop and look behind me. The lake is already becoming still again. The ripples I created are spreading outward, getting weaker with every second. Soon there will be no sign that I was ever in there. They fade like an echo, like a scream heard through a wall. Then nothing. I grew up in Belfast. Not exactly what I would describe as a lost city of gold. There has certainly been plenty of light in Belfast over the years, though not always the sort people write myths about. Bomb flashes, burning cars, streetlights on empty roads, police lights through curtains. My childhood was not some constant nightmare, of course. People like to simplify places just as much as they simplify history. There were good days, normal days, rainy mornings, school, friends, family meals, bad television, football, arguments over nothing. There was kindness. There was laughter. There still is. Ireland has beautiful parts. Anyone who says otherwise is lying. But beauty does not erase the ugly things. A nice landscape does not undo grief. A friendly pub does not repair a broken family. A green field does not make history disappear. Ireland has claws. My professor would have liked that phrase. Maybe that is why the Atlantis article bothered me more than it should have. Or maybe fascinated me. I kept thinking about myths. A myth is supposed to be a story. But most myths are also lies. Or at least they are stories that have been bent so many times that no one can separate truth from invention anymore. I have been lied to plenty in my life. By teachers, by relatives, by people who claim to love me, by politicians, by strangers, by myself. Eventually, I discovered something useful. It is much easier to believe in nothing. If you believe nothing, you never have to work out which lie is closest to the truth. Still, everyone has stories, even people who claim they do not believe in anything. When I was a child, I liked stories about Atlantis. There was a comic series I used to read. I cannot remember all the details now. There were warriors in shining armor, wizards, sea monsters, huge buildings beneath the ocean. After Atlantis sank, the people did not die. Instead, they changed. They learned how to live underwater. The drowned city became an empire beneath the sea. I loved that idea. Not the empire, not the treasure, not the magic. The part I loved most was imagining the moments the city first sank. Imagine being there. Imagine the streets flooding, people running, Water smashing through doors and windows. Families trapped in buildings. Imagine the fear, the certainty. You would know you were going to die. There would be no question. You would hold your breath while the water rose around you. You would fight. You would panic. You would feel your lungs burning. And then, when you could hold your breath no longer, you would finally inhale. Except instead of drowning, you would discover that you could breathe. Just like that. The thing you had feared most would become harmless. The end of your life would become the beginning of another kind of life. Imagine the relief. Imagine discovering that everything was going to be okay. Not the same, but okay. That idea stayed with me long after I stopped reading comics. This morning, after reading the article, I made a decision. Maybe not instantly. Maybe the decision had been forming for a long time, and I simply gave it a name today. I am Irish. I have lived here all my life. There are things about this place I love, but there are also things I am tired of. Memories I am tired of carrying. Faces I am tired of seeing. Stories I am tired of hearing. And when I thought about Atlantis being Ireland, I found myself strangely offended. Not because the theory seemed ridiculous, because I did not want it to be true. I did not want Atlantis to become ordinary. I did not want a magical lost city to become a place with supermarkets, traffic, arguments, damp walls, unpaid bills, and old grudges. I did not want it reduced to another piece of land with its own ugly history. Frankly, I am not ready to trade Atlantis for Ireland. Not yet. Maybe never. I walk toward my jacket and pick it up. The fabric is dry. My hands are not. I wipe them against my trousers before pulling the jacket on over my wet sweater. Then I look at the bicycle. I suppose I will have to do something about it. Leaving it here would raise questions eventually. It is an expensive-looking bike. Lightweight frame. Clean gears. The sort of thing someone buys because they take cycling seriously. The rider looks serious, too. Fit, athletic. Strong shoulders, strong legs. Exactly the sort of person you might assume would be difficult to control. Looks can be misleading. He really did not fight much. Not in the end. There was some surprise, of course, confusion, a little resistance. But nothing like what I expected. Maybe cold water weakens people quickly. Maybe panic does. Maybe the human body is simply less impressive than we like to imagine once it understands it is dying. I walk toward the bike. The newspaper page trapped against the tire keeps fluttering in the wind. I crouch down and pull it free. For a moment, I think that the universe has a sense of humor. It is the page with the article. Atlantis. I straighten it out and look at the headline. There is Ireland. There is the theory. There are the measurements and maps. There are all the reasons some scientist believes a legendary, drowned civilization might have been sitting in front of us all along. I almost smile. Perhaps that should make me reconsider. Perhaps I should take it as a sign. Perhaps the truth is supposed to be enough. But I do not want their truth. They can write their articles. They can explain the geology. They can tell everyone that myths are only memories with decorations added over time. They can turn every mystery into evidence and every miracle into a misunderstanding. Let them. As far as I am concerned, Atlantis still exists. Not Ireland, not Dogger Bank, not some ancient settlement buried under sand. The real Atlantis. The Atlantis from the stories. The city under the water. A place where people who sink do not really die. A place where drowning is only the doorway. a place where the people below are waiting for the next arrival. I turn and look back at the lake. It is completely still now. No ripples, no movement, nothing on the surface to suggest what happened beneath it. That is what I love most about water. It keeps secrets without effort. Earth remembers disturbances. You dig a hole, and the ground shows the wound. You spill blood on a floor, and someone has to clean it. You break something, and pieces remain. Water is different. Water closes behind you. It swallows the evidence. It smooths itself flat again. The lake looks exactly as it did before the cyclist arrived. Exactly as it looked yesterday. Exactly as it will look tomorrow. For a moment, I imagine him under there. Not the way he looked when I last saw him. Not pale, not frightened, not kicking uselessly beneath the surface. I imagine him standing somewhere below, breathing. Confused at first, perhaps, then slowly understanding. Maybe there are streets down there. Maybe buildings. Maybe windows glowing in the dark. Maybe everyone I send below eventually finds one another. The thought warms me more than my jacket does. That is the difference between murder and mythology, perhaps. The story you tell yourself afterward. History bites. History scratches. History has claws. But myths are softer. Myths let you change endings. They let drowned people breathe. They let dead cities live. They let men at the bottom of lakes become citizens instead of corpses. I fold the newspaper page and tuck it beneath my arm. Then I take hold of the bicycle. I will move it somewhere else. Perhaps leave it along another road. Maybe near the trailhead, where someone might think the owner wandered away. It does not matter much. By the time anyone starts asking serious questions, the lake will have been quiet for hours, maybe days. And I will come back. Of course I will. There are plenty of lonely people around here. Cyclists, walkers, tourists in summer. People who stop beside the water because they want silence. They come here for the same reason I do. To catch their breath. To think. To look at something deep and imagine that depth means wisdom. Most of them never wonder if someone is watching. Most people do not think they are standing at the edge of a city. They certainly do not imagine they are about to become part of it. I look at the lake one last time. Maybe the geologist is right. Maybe Atlantis was Ireland. Maybe there is no lost empire beneath the sea. Maybe there never was. But stories do not need to be true when someone is willing to keep them alive. And I am willing. More than willing. They can call Atlantis a myth. They can call it a misunderstanding. They can call it Ireland. I know better now. Atlantis is real because I have decided it is. It is beneath this water. Growing, waiting, one citizen at a time. And if I have to spend the rest of my life populating it myself, then that is exactly what I will do. Story 5. Something strange happened to me one night while I was driving home from work. Even now, after everything that has happened, I still find myself replaying that night in my head, trying to find the moment when I should have realized something was wrong. Maybe there was some warning I missed. Maybe there was something about the phone call, or the way she was sitting at the bus stop, that should have made me turn around and never look back. At the time, though, it seemed like an ordinary night. I had worked late, which wasn't unusual. My job often kept me there longer than I wanted, and by the time I finally finished everything, most of the building was empty. I grabbed my coat, shut down my computer, and headed toward the parking lot. My coworker Jeff was still there, gathering his things. "See you tomorrow," I told him. He waved. Drive safe. I told him I would, then walked outside. The drive home usually took around 30 minutes. It wasn't bad compared to what some people had to deal with. There was almost never any traffic at that hour. I would pass through 2 or 3 traffic lights near town, then take one long country road for most of the rest of the trip. I lived pretty far outside town, and once I got onto the country road, my phone signal usually disappeared completely. That was normal. I had gotten used to it. I was pulling out of the parking lot when my phone rang. I glanced at the screen. Jessica. I almost thought I was seeing the name wrong. Jessica was my ex-girlfriend. We had dated for about 3 years before breaking up, and she hadn't contacted me in almost a year. We hadn't ended things in some huge, dramatic fight. It had been sad and uncomfortable, but we had both eventually accepted that things weren't working anymore. After that, we mostly stopped talking. So seeing her name on my phone that night surprised me. I almost didn't answer. Then I remembered I was about to lose service, and something told me that if she was calling after all this time, it probably wasn't for some casual conversation. I pulled over near the edge of the road and answered. Before I could even say hello, Jessica started talking. Her voice immediately put me on edge. She sounded terrified. "Please," she said quickly, "you need to help me. I can't reach anyone else. I need you to pick me up at the Cypress Street bus station as soon as you can get here." "Jess? What happened?" The line went dead. I stared at my phone. For a second, I thought the call had dropped, but I still had signal. I immediately called her back. No answer. I tried again. Nothing. I sat there for maybe 30 seconds, trying to decide what to do. The whole thing was strange. If Jessica was actually in danger, why was she calling me instead of the police? Why had she sounded like she was whispering? Why had the call ended so suddenly? And why wouldn't she answer me now? Still, I couldn't ignore it. Whatever had happened between us, I had once cared about her deeply. I couldn't just drive home after hearing that fear in her voice, so I turned around. Cypress Street was in the opposite direction from my house, but not terribly far away. I knew there were a few bus stops in the area, though I wasn't sure exactly which one she meant. I drove there as quickly as I could without speeding too much. When I reached Cypress Street, I slowed down and began checking each bus stop. The first one was empty. So was the second. Then I found her. Jessica was sitting alone on a bench beneath a bus shelter. I felt an immediate wave of relief. She was wearing a large coat and sitting with her arms wrapped tightly around herself. From a distance, it looked like she was shivering. The street was almost completely empty. There were no buses, no other people, no obvious sign of whoever had frightened her. I pulled the car over beside the curb and lowered the window. "Jess?" She didn't react. I waited. "Jessica?" For a moment, I felt embarrassed. Maybe it wasn't actually her. Maybe I had just driven across town because some stranger with a similar coat happened to be sitting at the same bus stop.